Hello, 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 besties and dolls. Welcome back, Music Corner, everyone's favorite World Cup themed YouTube channel. That's a joke, but Jesus, Kylian Mbappe has just been astounding. No, we're not talking about soccer today. We are talking about the best debut albums of this year of our Lord 2022 more. And I'll be the first person to admit, this is a stupid thing to make a video about, because 5 years from now, 10 years from now, when we look back on what the best debut albums of this year are, it's might be some of these, but it's probably also going to be a bunch of stuff that nobody has heard yet. Artists who are still underground and have yet to have their breakthrough, and when they have that breakthrough, we'll look back and think, how did we not see this before? But that's just the nature of bands becoming popular and discovering their audience, and it takes a lot of time to do that sometimes. So for the fun of it, and to have something to take my mind off the indomitable year-end lists in which I'm already working on, we're going to record this cute little video where I'm going to shout out 15 debut projects from this year that I liked quite a bit. We're going to run through the first 5 real quick in sort of like a honorable mention kind of style, and then get into the bulk of it. First, I want to shout out Coi Leray real quick, who released, average, very decent, very acceptable sort of trap and pop rap album this year. She caught a lot of hate for this record on TikTok and on Instagram and hip-hop spaces and stuff from like 14-year-old boys who run Tyler the Creator fan pages. But compared to a lot of artists that debuted this year or blew up this year, whether it's like Yeet and Snot, or like one of the couple of Cardi clones that he's signed to his new label, Coi Leray pretty easily clears all of them, and I wanted to just throw some attention to this debut album because it at least flashes some potential, some skill, something that makes her unique, which not a whole lot of trap artists that debuted this year, aside from, Glorilla with her EP, really achieved. Also, shout out to the Linda Lindas, this cute little, like early teenager and tween operated punk rock band. They kind of blew up last year with that Racist Sexist Boy song that was cute and viral. And yeah, this record, it's really not even a novelty. It's just kind of a fun, enjoyable listen. It's very charming, excessively cute, and these kids, when they want to, they can kind of rock, and it is a fun listening experience throughout. Less of a fun listening experience throughout would be the new self-titled Wet Leg album, a record that I think a lot of people are probably expecting to see on any kind of list like this. It's certainly doing well on some of the year-end lists that have come out already, and yeah, this thing's decent. It's got a couple good singles. I personally like Angelica quite a bit. I wish it was a bigger hit for them, but the deep cuts here are just really a mess. I'm really throwing it onto this list because I want to shout out the potential that this band has, because when they're on their A game, clearly they do some really good stuff. I can totally envision this band having a more focused and mature and, I don't know, directional sophomore record that improves and highlights their qualities as songwriters and performers even better, which is something to look forward to. Next up, I want to give some credit to Bubble Tea and Cigarettes, this duo over here. I was introduced by a pretty good friend of mine to their song 5 a.m. Empanada with You, which was like their debut single, I think. So I got to be in pretty early on this band. Shout out to my friend. And yeah, when they dropped their debut record this year, I like it. It's a nocturnal, spacey, dream pop kind of odyssey. Very pretty, very lush. And yeah, I dig it. And the final honorable mention that I want to give credit to is the newest Sayurblaires record, this sort of MIDI, emo, and digital screamo record. It is on this section of the list because I know Blair personally. I've heard this record, workshop through a number of live shows. I was really familiar with a lot of these songs, and I don't want it to seem like nepotism. But yeah, I really fuck with this record. Its concept about wanting to kill your old self because you're transgender really related to me for some reason. And it's also just a whirlwind sonic experience with a lot of really noticeable and various influences that are playing at work here. A lot of some of my favorite internet core releases of the past few years, whether it's Weather Day or Paranol or Your Arms Are My Cocoon. I can kind of hear flashes of those in this record, and I like it a lot. I highly recommend it if any of that kind of sounds like your thing. Blair is super cool, and her music is worth checking out. Back on the Lululemon grind. Sponsor me. You do not want to look transphobic in 2023, so crack that issue on the head right now. Getting into the list proper at number 10, the new debut album, obviously, from Hyd. Now, technically, aside from a little compilation, this is like the only new album of fully original material that PC Music released this year, and they brought out the guns for this thing. There is songwriting and production on this record from a number of PC Music alumni. A.G. Cook, Sophie is on this thing, Caroline Polachek, Yonsei from Sigur Rós is on one of these tracks, and it's interesting. There's been a lot of discussion recently about what direction PC Music will take next with the sort of mainstreaming of hyperpop and the very unfortunate and tragic passing of Sophie, whose influences is obviously still being heard on this record, but even some of what just a few years ago were considered the like trademark PC Music acts have kind of moved on to other things. And while I don't think that Hyd is coming in here to replace anyone like Danielle Harrell or Hannah Diamond or GFOTY or anything, it certainly represents a change of pace for PC Music. This is a kind of chilling and sonically isolated record. The drums are distant and booming. The synthesizers are cold. It is a lot more of a naturalistic record than some of what we've heard from PC Music before, but in pretty stark contrast to that, it is a very personal record, quite an autobiographical one. It doesn't really have some of the very alien detachment that PC Music has sort of been known for. It's not a perfect record by any means, but I do like it. I do think there are some great highlights, and I do think it's worth checking out. If anything, is just a litmus test for where Hyd's career might be going and where the future of PC Music might be headed sonically. Coming in at number 9, we have the self-titled debut on Rough Trade Records from Caroline. This is a collective of musicians who are playing what is effectively post-rock, but what certainly has a lot of Midwestern influences to it. Some of that very distinct Midwestern twang isn't really the right word, but maybe dial is the word for it. You'll know exactly what I'm talking about when you put this record on. And yeah, this is another one where I find myself talking a lot about the potential because there's a lot of great musicianship on this record. Some great songwriting, some expansive compositions. I did have a pretty big complaint when I originally covered this record that occasionally this band just disappears completely into anonymity. And that's not something that's uncommon for debut records. It certainly wouldn't surprise me if they kind of found their sound on a sophomore effort. But listening to this debut album all the way through, it can be hard to kind of pinpoint at the end what a Caroline song sounds like. Regardless, I've seen a lot of praise for this thing. I think I just saw an indie blog the other day call it their second favorite album of the year, so it's certainly worth checking out if you're into post-rock, if you're into instrumental music. And it's not even entirely instrumental. There are vocals on a number of tracks here. It is just a very expansive feel. It's almost kind of like Duster in a sense, but a little bit more detached and a little bit more abstract. Coming in at number 8, Liven Up the Place. I just looked at my audio meters and I blew it the hell out. I'm so sorry for your eardrums, but I'm gonna do it again because we're talking about Hope You're Okay with their debut album, Error Code 404. It was the letdown, fuck it, that's why it's not and what you said now, didn't want it. If you follow me on Twitter, you definitely know about this band and this project because I've been simping for them for like 8 months at least. This is a great, charming, versatile little collection of hyperpop and pop punk parallel songs. There are all kinds of different funny, silly influences being melded into one on this whirlwind hyperpop effort. And while hyperpop is probably the one genre that you could find more debuts in 2022 than any other, this is the one that stuck out to me. Really love this record. Really love the opener. Songs like Paint, they walk a really, really perfect line between being emotional and vulnerable as a songwriter and just ecstatic and fun and zany as musicians. I got to interview this band for Ringtone Magazine, link in the bio, and they are just exceptionally fun, and they've already announced a sophomore album, which I think will be out next year, and it should also be awesome, so check it out. Number 7, courtesy of Run for Cover Records, and shout out to Brooklyn Vegan for turning me on to this band last year and being ready for their debut album, Anxious, with Little Green House. Don't cry me now. I want you out to say. This is a pop punk meets emo project. It's hard to describe it in one particular genre style, but they do bounce between a number of things, and it is a talented, exciting, and intense collection of songs that I enjoy quite a bit. This is another genre that's very, very saturated these days, especially when you're listening to as much local scene music as I am, but I really think these guys stand out. I think they're on a label for a reason. I think the great songwriting, I think the great emotional performances really shine through, and the closing track to this thing, You When You're Gone, has sneakily become like one of my favorite songs of the year. I think it's really, really beautiful, and don't be surprised if you see a song like Let Me on my singles list. Number 6 is kind of funny because there are a lot of people who just heard of Ethel Cain for the first time this year with her debut album, Preacher's Daughter, though, I mean, if you're in the know, you've probably been spinning some of her projects for a couple years now. And while her music is not explicitly trans, every trans person I know likes it. Something about the combination of indie and folk and the dark Southern Gothic and Americana things that she weaves into this thing. She is just hitting on something that is really interesting and really appealing. This record has been praised ad nauseum all year. I would say even a bit more than I'm comfortable with. It's definitely a long record, and not only are there songs here that I can do without, but there are songs that just go on well too long. Even tracks that are favorites of mine, like Gibson Girl and House in Nebraska, really don't need to be as long as they are. But regardless, it's really the vision of the character of Ethel Cain and the almost theater-like performance art that this record takes you on that is really selling it to people and making it such a joy to listen to, honestly. Number 5, this is the part where I say words wrong. The new album from Obongjayar. Genuinely sorry if I slaughtered that pronunciation. I'm doing my best. This is an artist who I was first tuned into a few years ago when he made a couple of appearances on Danny Brown's record, You Know What I'm Saying, and I liked it quite a bit, started paying attention to him, and was really blown away by his contribution to the Little Sims song Point and Kill. The two voices go extraordinary together. One of my favorite rap songs of this entire decade so far. It's amazing, and yeah, I was pretty excited for this debut album. But even then, I wasn't really expecting what we got because for a Nigerian London artist, there are certainly influences from the sounds of both cultures, but there are also a lot of other things mixed into this project. It is surprisingly indie and occasionally electronic at points. I've seen it compared to Yeast Tumor, so if you're into that, maybe check this record out. But what I like about it is just how much of a whirlwind listening experience it is. It is just unpredictable, but very fun, and there are some songs that are genuinely really catchy and groovy, and other songs that are brash or experimental or will totally just throw you off of your vision, and that makes it really exciting. It's a really interesting listen, but even more than that, it makes me curious as to what if ever he will settle on a direction musically and continue going in that direction, because honestly, if it continues to be this much of a whirlwind, I'm not complaining. Number 4, another duo. There's a lot of duos on this list. This is like the 4th one, and there's another one coming later. But this duo of little jazz instrumentalist prodigies, you know what I'm talking about, DOMI and JD Beck, with their debut album, Not Tight. You don't have to rob me, it's not really worth it. If you're the type of person who knows things about stuff, you probably have known who these two are for a couple of years. They've been bouncing around, playing on records and in live performances for a number of notable artists. They are signed to Anderson .Paak's Ape Shit label imprint. That's what this record is released under, and yeah, it garnered a good bit of attention as a result. I really think that it lived up to the hype. Not only is this a technically proficient record, they're certainly doing more here than you would be able to glean from your average Starbucks coffeehouse jazz record, but it's also really fun. It's really tongue-in-cheek. The couple of tracks here that have lyrics are often genuinely funny, which is kind of interesting for a record like this. You know, one that is nominated for Best Instrumental Album at the Grammys. But whatever, because the instrumentals on this thing are great. They are jittery, lively, and fun. These two live up to the billing of musical prodigies that you hear so much when people talk about this record and discuss these two collectively as artists. Number 3. And now we are getting into the really good stuff. Jockstrap with their debut record, I Love You, Jennifer B. Concrete over water. Another that I have seen top year-end best of lists already. Now, I didn't really include any, side projects or solo projects from already famous people or first-time collaborations. I wanted this to be more of an authentic list of debut projects. One half of Jockstrap, George Ellery, is a member of Black Country New Road, but it seems like this musical project has been going on for a long time, almost as long as that one has, and that it is sort of an entirely separate endeavor. I would imagine a lot of people stumbled upon this authentically without being transitioned over from Black Country New Road into Jockstrap. It's also a wildly different sound. This thing is a kind of chaotic avant pop record, I suppose you could say. The production is extremely synthetic, and there are some just flat out electronica and EDM inspired moments on this record, but it also has moments of genuine pop songwriting and more expansive, almost Julia Holter or Wise Blood type chamber pop songwriting, and they are all weaved in throughout each other, chaotically, mystifyingly jumping from one to another. This really is a chaotic whirlwind of a record. But I would also argue that it's a very composed one and intentional, and it's a lot of decision making. What was that? It is intentional in a lot of its decision making. There we go. And while I was a little bit of a critic and a snob about some of these tracks that I think were trying to be fun and quirky and sort of miss the boat, I do think that when they're taking themselves seriously, they are almost always spectacular on this record. I envision great things in the future for this band, but every time I make a prediction like that, it blows up in my face somehow. Looking at you, Power Bottom. Number 2, and I would say this is probably the most industry of all of my picks, aside from maybe Wet Leg, the debut Amber Mark album, 3 Dimensions Deep. Now, the reason I say this is industry is because she has been a known commodity for quite a long time. She has put out some shorter projects. She has featured on a number of different artists' records. When I covered this album, I even dug up some praise that I directed her as a vocalist on a Dirty Projectors album that came out in 2018. So 4 years ago, I was already talking about Amber Mark. And yes, after releasing about 1 million singles last year and early this year, she dropped this long debut record, but a rewarding one, a worthwhile one that is packed full of great songs, from Bliss to FOMO to Cosmic to What It Is. There are just more great tracks than you can count or keep track of. And if you like R&B, this won't be the warmest, most SZA-esque R&B record you'll hear this year, but if you like something that is a little bouncier, a little more magnetic and pop flavored, you're definitely going to get those extremely catchy hooks and melodies all over this thing. The production, it's a little colder, it's a little bit more nocturnal, but I think that really pays off and highlights what makes Amber Mark so interesting as a vocalist and an artist, and I just really recommend this record. It's very good. If you're the type of person who would even click on a video like this, you're probably also paying attention to music in the critical underground. You probably know what I'm about to say. It is likely the record that you've been anticipating, one of the most unanimously acclaimed debut records of the year, at least from what critics were willing to take this thing on, and one of the most anticipated debuts, certainly of the year, and in the hardcore scene in the past couple of years. I can't think of a record that I saw as much anticipation for as the debut album from Chat Pile, God's Country. Yep, this thing is crazy. Crazy, crazy, crazy. Intense is another good record. Dark, unrelenting, experimental. I think sometimes when you say hardcore, people get the impression that it's as simple as, thrash and bash hardcore punk. But this record defies that in every sense. Not only is this thing a little bit hardcore, a little bit post-hardcore, a little bit punk, particularly in some of its messaging and sentimentalities, but it is also very bold and very ambitious, and I would even say that it is influenced by some more compositionally dense genres like post-rock and even a little prog rock, like some Black MIDI flavors on this thing. Not that it's ever that silly or chaotic, because these guys are dead fucking serious about what they're doing. And yeah, it is just brooding, it is raw, it is intense, it bullies the shit out of me as a listener, but I like it in a way that I keep coming back to. It keeps knocking me down, and I get back up, and it knocks me down again. From some of the quieter, more patient, more brooding songs to some of the more pummelingly intense hardcore bangers. Is that a word? Pummelingly. That's not a word. It's hard to describe this record. It fries my brain. I guess I would compare it to like that Body album last year that came out earlier in the year that crushed your head into soup. But rather than with just walls of noise and distant screams, this record is often so much more confrontational, intimate, screamed vocals and lyrics and messaging that are extremely important to the songs, and instrumentation that is just blistering, intense. The performances are crazy. The production is crackling. It is just a really, really intense and insane listening experience, but one that I have been enjoying having all year and will continue to enjoy into next year and until we get even more music from this band, because I think that what they're doing is pretty irreplaceable. And that's it. Some debut albums. What was your favorite debut album of the year? Call me a bitch for not including Yard Act, if you want me to, or Muna, which might be the worst record I heard, period, all year, debut or otherwise. And I'm going to get back to the grind of working on year-end stuff. Sometime in the last week of the year, there will be a video uploaded to this channel counting down the 10 best and the 10 worst hit singles, the big songs of the year. And keep an eye out for the blog. Obviously, we'll be doing EP lists, songs, singles, albums, just like every year. And I'll be in my cave, grinding away, tweeting, taking selfies, whatever it is that you imagine I do in my spare time. Thanks for watching, and if you work for Lululemon or you know someone who does, Please tell them to sponsor me. I really, I really like expected a phone call pretty quickly, and now it's just like, what am I doing?